Well, Nando V Movies decided to drop yet another one of these things on YouTube. Figured I might as well jump in and give my 2 cents. Anyone familiar with old school Star Wars video games is familiar with the Jedi Knight series. What eventually began as essentially a Doom clone in Dark Forces, steered very hard into the whole Jedi and lightsaber combat simulator with Jedi Knight and its expansion pack Mysteries of the Sith, culminating in the 2 entries from Raven Software, Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy, the latter of which is regarded as still possessing the best lightsaber combat of any Star Wars video game ever made. But while Jedi Academy receives all the accolades it deserves, and perhaps a few that it doesn't, Outcast, I feel, is unfairly ignored as sort of the hidden gem of the series. For while it is undeniable that Academy has by far superior gameplay, Outcast has by far the best story in the series. And so, my contribution to One Last Scene will be the conclusion of the story of Jedi Outcast and how it functions as the perfect conclusion to the arc of one of the most well-known expanded universe characters, Kyle Katarn. Warning, this video will include spoilers for pretty much every Jedi Knight game except for Jedi Academy, so you've been warned. First, to fully grasp the importance of the story of Outcast and its conclusion, I must summon forth that eternal enemy of the internet and the chronically short attention spans that it fosters. Context. Born 23 years before the Battle of Yavin, Kyle Katarn was born and raised on the moon of Sulan by his father, Morgan Katarn. Eventually, like a lot of young men of his generation, Kyle went off to the Imperial Academy. This despite the fact that, unbeknownst to Kyle himself, his father was secretly aligned with the Rebel Alliance. But he had sent his son there because he hoped that at least this way, Kyle would have a better future for himself than what his father had, making Morgan Katarn essentially the anti-Owen Lars. Alas, Morgan Katarn would be brutally murdered by one of Palpatine's Dark Jedi, Jarek, along with most of the other rebels on Sulan, all as part of an Imperial attack intended to make it look like the Rebel Alliance had done it. The truth was only revealed to Kyle later by Rebel agent Jan Ors. But when he did find out who had really murdered his father, Kyle switched sides faster than you could say use the Force, and would spend the next few years performing several missions for the Rebel Alliance, even developing something of a romance with Jan. However, he never lost sight of his true motivation: find Jarek and avenge his father's death. Then, 1 year following the Battle of Endor, Kyle finally obtained the chance he had sought for to kill Jarek and avenge Morgan Katarn, when he found himself not only hunting down the Dark Jedi, but racing him in an effort to get to a place of great power, the Valley of the Jedi on the remote world of Ruusan. Unless he was stopped, Jarek planned to use the force power of over 1,000 dead Jedi Knights trapped within the valley to make himself unstoppable. During the pursuit, Kyle awakened his own latent force sensitivity, and eventually, after a brief internal struggle, embraced the light side of the Force, letting go of his anger and desire for vengeance. He did end up killing Jarek in the end, but that was only because the Dark Jedi had refused Kyle's offer of mercy after being bested, forcing the new Jedi Knight to kill him in self-defense. After that, Kyle went on to become one of the senior figures within Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Academy on Yavin 4, and even became something of a tutor to former Emperor's Hand Mara Jade. Alas, while investigating some ancient ruins on the world of Dromund Kaas, Kyle briefly fell under the sway of the dark side, and though Mara was able to bring him back to the light, the experience left Kyle shaken, and so for a time, he renounced the ways of the Jedi. And this is where the story of Outcast begins. Taking place 12 years after the Battle of Yavin, Jedi Outcast begins with Kyle having once again gone back to being simply a rebel agent alongside his lover Jan Ors. However, on one such mission, Kyle runs afoul of Desan, another fallen student of the New Jedi Order who has fully embraced the ways of the dark side. Desan pretended to kill Jan, and then, as hoped, Kyle went off to the Valley of the Jedi in order to restore his connection to the Force so that he can take his revenge, unwittingly revealing its location to Desan and thus allowing him to imbue many of his followers with the power of the Force, creating cheap but still deadly knockoffs of Jedi Knights known as the Reborn. While searching for clues that will allow him to track down and defeat Desan, Kyle does end up discovering that Jan is still alive, as well as fighting several battles alongside Lando Calrissian and Luke Skywalker, all building up to taking out the Reborn and one final clash with Desan himself. However, the thing that I wish to focus on here is how the final scene of Jedi Outcast plays into Kyle's development over the course of the game. And the principal story writer for Outcast, Michael Stemmel, shows this by use of that simple, famous Jedi phrase, "May the Force be with you." Throughout the game, various characters say this phrase to Kyle, wishing him the best of luck in his endeavors. Mon Mothma, Lando, Luke, and the ghost of his father, Morgan. The way in which Kyle responds to each of these uses of the phrase, "May the Force be with you," over the course of the game is an indicator of his own development. Kyle's arc over the course of Outcast is that of a man who has turned away from the Force, but over the course of the story learns to re-embrace it and the ways of the Jedi. As such, the first time he is told in-game, "May the Force be with you," he doesn't really verbalize his response. It's just a cynical and world-weary sigh.
And may the Force be with you.
Later, after he believes Jan is dead and the ghost of his father gives the same blessing to him, Kyle's response is more sad and resigned than anything.
Then remember her as she was, and may the Force be with you.
It hasn't been so far.
From that point forward through the game, as other characters say, "May the Force be with you," Kyle's responses go from non-committal,
"May the Force be with you." Right.
To cautious,
"May the Force be with you, Kyle."
We'll see.
To hopeful,
"May the Force be with you, Kyle." Yeah, you too, Luke.
Until in the final scene, having saved Jan and the Jedi, Kyle offers the salutation himself.
Thanks, and may the Force be with you, Luke.
Yes, the visuals are pretty dated. This was a video game from 2002, but this final scene, and specifically this final line of dialogue, is a mark of excellence. It is the culmination of Kyle's journey not only through Jedi Outcast, but arguably the Jedi Knight series as a whole. Kyle Katarn, in many ways, is what would have happened if Han Solo decided to be a Jedi. Most of his development and character arc is about overcoming loss, overcoming anger, overcoming the desire for revenge. But even after he becomes a Jedi for the first time in Jedi Knight, he has a great moment of failure, as seen by his fall to the dark side in Mysteries of the Sith. And while, luckily, his fall doesn't last too long so that he doesn't go on to do the kind of atrocities that, say, Revan and Darth Vader perpetrated, it's understandable that Kyle would have such a crisis of faith and a loss of confidence in himself, and why he would turn away from the Force. Thus, the game is aptly named Jedi Outcast. Only Kyle is an outcast by choice, not because the others turned him away. After all, one of the great themes of Star Wars is that of redemption. However, because Jan died because Kyle was too weak to save her, exemplified by Desan kicking him around like a football early in the game, though the Valley of the Jedi does help Kyle regain his connection to the Force, he still has to regain faith in himself. Specifically, faith in himself as a Jedi, one who uses the Force. After all, he succumbed to the dark side once before. It could happen again. Luckily for Kyle, it seems that others have more faith in him than he does in himself, like his father's spirit, Luke, and Lando. And in the end, that faith is rewarded. Though he comes dangerously close, he does ultimately choose not to kill Tavion, Desan's right hand, in anger, showing that he is already moving past his desire for revenge. He refuses to be goaded when Admiral Fayar, another of Desan's lackeys, taunts him with how he tortured Jan while she was his prisoner, and by the time of the final confrontation with Desan, Kyle finds himself willing to offer this man, who, like himself, has fallen from the path of righteousness, the chance to redeem himself. But in order to achieve redemption, you have to want it first, and Desan does not want. And so Kyle kills him, not in revenge, but because it must be done. By now, he is outcast no longer. He is a true Jedi Knight. Exemplified by Kyle himself saying, "May the Force be with you," showing that he has regained his self-belief and embraced his destiny. For this scene alone, I say Jedi Outcast is a game worth playing and a story worth experiencing.